The brain. The most complex organ in the human body. The brain is brilliant. It does so many different things and houses our memory, our conscious, and even performs vital operations. Today, though, we will be diving into the anatomy of the brain and what each part does. Hopefully by the end of the video, you will have learned the basics of the brain. The first thing you will be learning are the lobes of the brain. There are only 4 lobes located in the brain. You have the frontal, the temporal, the parietal, and the occipital. All of these lobes have their separate functions and locations. The frontal lobe is located in the front of the brain. Frontal, front, pretty easy to remember. The frontal lobe is responsible for our emotions, memory, and ability to control impulses. As you age, your frontal lobe becomes fully developed. Many people say this is why teenagers sometimes can't make the right decisions. The next lobe is the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is located on either side of the head, lying underneath the temples. Easy to remember once again. Temporal, temple. The temporal lobe's main function is concerning of speech, but is also known for sensory input. The next lobe located towards the upper middle portion of the brain is the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe is above the temporal lobe. You can remember this by thinking of the parietal lobe as the parent and the temporal lobe as the kid. The parietal lobe is superior to the temporal lobe, like a parent is to a child. The parietal lobe is where information such as taste, temperature, and touch are integrated or processed. The final lobe of the brain is the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is in the very back of the brain. It is responsible for processing vision. Once more, these are all 4 of the lobes of the brain: frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and the occipital lobe. Now let's move on from the lobes and begin analyzing the smaller anatomy of the brain. I will try and go from the bottom of the brain to the top, hopefully allowing you to remember the order of the parts. At the very bottom we have the spinal cord. The spinal cord runs along your spine and connects all parts of the body to the brain. Moving up, connecting the spinal cord with the brainstem is the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata helps regulate breathing, heart, and blood vessel function, digestion, sneezing, and swallowing. The medulla oblongata is a small bump in comparison to its neighbor, the pons. Pons, for some reason, is the bigger bump, even though it has a smaller name. Pons is known for being the bridge between the cerebellum and the rest of the brain. You could also think of it as a message station between several areas of the brain. Moving up, we encounter a round-shaped object, called the cerebellum. The cerebellum is responsible for coordinating muscle movements, for example swinging a golf club, riding a bike, walking. Anything that takes a little bit of skill to do. Next up is the mesencephalon aqueduct. This aqueduct connects the 3rd ventricle with the 4th ventricle, transporting CSF. The 4th ventricle, otherwise known as a hole or cavity. This cavity is located between the pons and the cerebellum and holds CSF. The next part of the brain is the thalamus. The thalamus modifies sensory information to the cerebral cortex. The thalamus is directly above the hypothalamus, which is in charge of regulating hunger, thirst, and sympathetic response. Even though it is out of order, we have the mesencephalon. The mesencephalon is also known as the midbrain, and is known for vision, hearing, motor control, sleep, wake, arousal, and temperature regulation. Near the mesencephalon we have the pituitary gland. Although it is not technically part of the brain, I believe it a necessity to know. The pituitary gland is also known as the master gland, due to it controlling multiple hormones. Next is a C-shaped bundle of fibers known as the fornix. The fornix acts as the major output tract of the hippocampus. Let's actually talk about the hippocampus. The hippocampus, which resembles the shape of a horseshoe, is responsible for memory formation and storage. Located on the outside of the hippocampus is an almond-shaped mass called the amygdala. The amygdala is involved with the experiences of emotions. Another odd-shaped object are the olfactory bulbs. The olfactory bulbs are antenna-like axons which pass information to other parts of the brain. After the olfactory bulbs there is the basal ganglia. The part of the brain specializes in processing information on movement and in fine-tuning the activity of brain circuits that determine the best possible response in a given situation. Above all of this is a broad band of nerve fibers, known as the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum basically just connects the 2 hemispheres of the brain. Let's now move on even farther to the top of the brain. This groove right here is known as the central sulcus. This is a landmark of the brain that separates the parietal lobe and the frontal lobe. Now on either side of the groove is the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus. The precentral gyrus is also known as the primary motor cortex, and the postcentral gyrus is known as the primary somatosensory area. We are almost done actually. We only have 2 more parts left. This here is called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is located in the frontal lobe and is thought of planning complex cognitive behavior, personality expression, decision making, and moderating social behavior. Finally, our last part of the brain is the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the principal and most anterior part of the brain in vertebrates, located in the front area of the skull and consisting of 2 hemispheres, left and right. The cerebrum is known for the integration of complex sensory and neural functions and the initiation and coordination of voluntary activity in the body. Those are 25 parts of the brain. This actually went by really quickly. I hope I was able to teach you something, and until next time.